Welcome, everyone. This is the February All-America City Promising Practices webinar, Taking Climate Actions at the Local Level. My name is Rebecca Trout, and I'm the Program Director of the All-America City Awards at the National Civic League. The League is a 125-year-old nonprofit, and we aim to advance civic engagement to create equitable and thriving communities. A little bit about our All-America City Awards. It is our flagship program, which began in 1949 to recognize civic engagement and local government. This year, we'll be recognizing 10 communities as All-America Cities for their inclusive civic engagement work that is fostering health and well-being in their communities. To win, communities must demonstrate innovation, impact, equity and inclusiveness, civic engagement, and cross-sector collaboration by describing 3 successful efforts to address local challenges around health and well-being. Today is actually the deadline for our 2020 AAC applications, so this is a very exciting time for us as we begin our review committee's process of selecting this year's 20 finalists. While AAC celebrates local successes and accomplishments, we use these monthly webinars to share those innovations and practices to those around the country. Today, we will be hearing about 2 community programs that are addressing issues of sustainability with resident-led and involved programs. Today's presenters will be Jonathan Wachtel, Sustainability Manager with the City of Lakewood, Colorado. Then we will be joined by Colleen Wisniewski, Environmental Sustainability Manager with the City of Chula Vista, as well as Corey Downs, Conservation Specialist with the City of Chula Vista. We do have an opportunity to collect questions throughout the presentation. You can submit those via the chat box, and we will have the presenters answer all of those at the very end of the webinar. So now, without any further ado, I'm happy to welcome Jonathan, the Sustainability Manager with the City of Lakewood. Jonathan?
Great, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to start requesting to share my screen here to Rebecca. Did we do it?
Looks great.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for the time, and I'm going to take the next 20 minutes or so to talk a little bit about the work we've done here in Lakewood to really build our sustainability plan and then on-the-ground implementation efforts through a lot of inclusive participation with our community, and really how we've leveraged our assets, by which I mean the skills and expertise and the passion of residents in our community to really make our plan come to life and move it forward into an implementation phase. Unfortunately, Alyssa Vogan, who is going to be presenting on the Sustainable Neighborhoods portion of this, is under the weather, so I'm going to cover for her on that portion of this today. So you're stuck hearing just me throughout, and I'll be happy to take questions at the end of the overall webinar. So I think some key questions, we tried to frame this a little bit about these 3 challenges that we think are really kind of fundamental to the planning process in local government and implementing things like comprehensive plans and sustainability plans. And those are, how do you strike a balance between inclusive participation that's meaningful and values where everyone is and comes from and their level of knowledge and their points of view, with the need to bring technical expertise to the work. So we always seem to find that a challenge, and we really took that to heart as we designed our planning process for our sustainability plan. We also wanted to address this challenge that I think a lot of local governments have, which is how do you create space for innovation and for adaptability for those things that are maybe unproven, not practical on the surface level, and maybe aren't funded in any way. And I think the risk there is that if you just ignore those things, you never really create space for innovation. So we really wanted to figure out how to include that in our planning and our implementation. And then fundamentally, how do you really crowdsource your solutions and your implementation? How do you leverage passion and expertise of your stakeholders to get things done, so it's not just on the shoulders of your organization? And so to start, I'll talk a little bit about how we try to answer some of those questions in our sustainability planning process. And as you can see, we did this in 2015, and so we actually have quite a bit of improvement in a lot of our tools and technology to do inclusive participation that we didn't have at the time. A lot of more online platforms that we had. So a lot of this work had to still be done out in the community in open houses, at neighborhood meetings, at ward meetings with our city councilors. And knowing that often that's kind of a select group of people, we really tried to create different ways of approaching participation. And in the end, we ended up with 8 open houses, 24 work group meetings. Actually, it's more than that. I'm going to spend some of my time really talking about the work group design. And you can see we had over 450 hours of direct community participation. And that does not include online feedback and forums and emails and that type of thing, but direct community participation. So the way that this was organized was really in 4 major phases. Phase 1 you could really look at as the research and information gathering, and that was a very high-level, inclusive part of the process, a bunch of open houses. We brought in expert speakers and created resources online that were educational. We had open forums, we did surveys, research, a lot of the typical processes and things you would do during a typical planning process. Phase 2 and 3 is where I'm going to spend some of my time speaking about this in more detail, and that was really these working groups that we put together. And our approach was to really bring in residents, stakeholders, industry experts, appropriate staff, and get them all in the same room to keep each other accountable. And so that really took up almost an entire year of planning effort based on the number of meetings and working group topic areas that we took on. And then phase 3 I'll talk a little bit about as well, because this is where the technical piece comes into play, where we really wanted to make sure that we were using data and assessing the ideas to make sure that they were actually valuable and useful. And so that kind of addressed some of these issues. Maybe the terminology of data-driven wasn't necessarily what we were going for, but really data-informed and then data-verified as we put together our goals and our targets. And then, of course, we finished with going back almost like a phase 1, open houses, big kind of higher level discussion as a community. So to talk a little bit about the working group format that we set up, we took on 6 very specific focused topic areas that really emerged from phase 1 scoping with the community. And we brought together all the experts that we could really reach out to in the Denver metro area, which is where the city of Lakewood is located. So we had scientists from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, from the EPA, from consulting firms. We had residents from across the community. We had business community involved, nonprofit organizations, and we brought in staff. And what we did was we didn't just kind of do high-level visioning with these working groups. We brought all of the input we had collected through open houses and surveys. We brought a huge amount of staff research and data. We pulled best practices from other local government plans and from what at the time was the STAR Community Index, which is a rating system for sustainable communities, which is now become kind of grown into the LEED certification for sustainable communities. And we were able to bring all of those resources and information, put together informational primers and packets, slideshows, videos, and really make sure that everyone coming into these working groups had all that information ahead of time before we even met for the first time. And we also asked all of those participants to commit to seeing through all the meetings in the working group, and I think that was really important. We asked them to commit to attending at least 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5, depending on the working group of these meetings. So we had continuity and we didn't end up taking big steps backwards or losing participation along the way. And as a result, I think what was really amazing in those settings was the appreciation of most of the participants at the amount we asked them to do. I think in my experience, having previously led comprehensive plan updates and special area plans, there's a really unfortunate opportunity to kind of ask a lot of time out of stakeholders and then keep things so high level and broad that maybe they don't feel like you're really hearing them or leveraging their expertise. And in this case, we could have experts coming in with really forward-thinking ideas and staff there to say, that's great, but maybe we're not ready for hydrogen fueling stations yet for vehicles. What's more practical in the short term? We had residents, asking for giving good feedback, but also asking for really huge steps forward, maybe from where we were, ban pesticide use in our parks, ban chemicals in our community, things like that. And we could have staff there to kind of keep them in line, or if we had resident, not keep them in line is probably not the right word, but staff there to kind of temper the expectations and help communicate why logistically that may not be very practical to go from where we were to a complete halting of using those types of resources. So it really helped kind of in this accountability triangle to help really work through things, make sure everything was fact-based and practical, and it really built strong relationships, and we'll talk about how we leveraged that here in a minute. And as a result, we ended up with really strong goals, direct measurable targets throughout the plan. And so this is where I'll talk a little bit about how we verified the practicality of a lot of those targets. And I think as you set plans, it's always set goals and plans, it's always hard to know whether you want to set something that's practical and achievable, or you want to set some type of aspirational value statement for your community. And we really tried to find somewhere right in the middle that was practical and achievable, but also was not so simple that it didn't feel like we were stretching and asking something of ourselves to make progress in the areas of sustainability. So you can see in this example, we talk about a very specific percentage of renewable energy, and we have, I think 36 of these across the entire plan area. The next thing that our working groups with all the expertise were enabled us to do with our plan was to really develop very practical implementation strategies that were detailed and laid out step-by-step processes to actually get these things done. And so here's one example about how to approach looking at the transition to renewable energy. And rather than just kind of that first statement, it really walks through all the steps that are going to need to be taken. And then we also put that along with a bunch of supporting implementation strategies. And we also thought this was a new and kind of different way to approach a lot of the strategies and ideas that are commonplace and that are important to do, but can sometimes be a little bit distracting and a little generic. I think when an organization maybe is a little cautious about taking a huge step forward, they don't want to jump right to a policy or programmatic solution. A lot of times, I think those of you in this space will be familiar with the request to collaborate or do education and promotion and outreach, or start by researching things. And those are all important, but we've really viewed those more as supporting strategies to the main strategies, that those are always present. And we didn't want to discount those, but we also didn't want to fill up our plan with all of these that may oftentimes kind of be the first step. So we grouped them as these supporting implementation strategies. And it really allowed us to assign a lot of this out to community members and stakeholders to help us with the collaboration, with the education, with identifying the right tools and the research. And then finally, to the data-informed, driven, and verified piece here, we really went back to all of the ideas in the plan and all of the strategies, and we wanted to assess those, and we worked with a consultant to really understand if we implement these, what type of greenhouse gas emission reduction potential might we see? What are all the environmental benefits? What are the economic benefits? What are the community benefits to really take that sustainability triple bottom line approach? And we were transparent in ranking those so that you could look at this plan and say, if we implement a certain strategy, here's where the majority of the benefit's going to come from. And we did the same with the cost and the feasibility component of implementing the plan. I think what's a challenge in the public space with a lot of implementation strategies is, unlike the private sector where you can more easily calculate a return on your investment for doing certain things, putting certain programs or retrofitting buildings in place and things like that. In the public sector, of course, sometimes those benefits don't come back to the organization, they go out to the community. And we wanted to have a way to communicate that, so we included that as well. And when we got done with all that process, there was a tremendous amount of buy-in, and it was actually very little controversy or political pushback when we went to adopt this, and our community is probably right in the middle of that spectrum, so we expected a little bit more pushback than we got, and we really think we owe that to the amount of participation and collaboration and how thoughtful every strategy was, and also the data and the assessments that went behind it. And we thought that was a huge accomplishment, but really we realized that the hard work was about to begin. And I think what happens oftentimes when in planning processes, you get a big plan adopted, and now it can go sit on the shelf unless you really find ways to catalyze and keep the momentum going. So the question then is it our job as a city organization to make this happen? And the truth is, if that's the case, we probably aren't going to get that much done, right? If it all has to come internally, then you're battling for resources and prioritization with everything else going on, every issue of the moment, as opposed to some of these long-range goals and visions for your community. And so it's clear to us that we needed continued help from our stakeholders. And as we worked with our stakeholders, we also kept hearing from them how much they wanted to help us implement this. And so then the challenge became really, how do you create that space? Safely, as an organization, how do you relinquish kind of control of implementing some of this stuff outside of your organization? Sorry, someone was making a request there. And create a safe space to be able to leverage that support without too much risk to the organization. And so we did that in two ways. I'm not going to get into this one. I'm just going to mention it briefly, and if anyone has questions, they can follow up with me. But one of the tools we put in place we call the Lakewood Scoop. It stands for the Lakewood Sustainability Cooperative. And it's basically a Rolodex, a database of people and organizations that want to participate with the city in implementing our sustainability vision. And they go onto our website and they fill out a pretty involved form. It might take 10 to 15 minutes to fill out, all about their interests and their skills and how they want to contribute. And we have that database to call upon as we have projects to implement, because so many of the time people were asking to volunteer and help out, and we didn't necessarily have something for them right then, but we wanted to build this resource database. So we call that our scoop, and we can talk about that another day. And the one I do want to transition to now is our very successful Sustainable Neighborhood Program. And to inspire you a little bit here, I'm going to share just maybe 4 or 5 of the more than, I think, 6,000 some projects that have been completed, citizen-led projects through this. And then I'll talk about how this is taking place. So the picture you're seeing on the screen right now is taking place in the Southern Gables neighborhood of Lakewood. This is their annual fall leaf collection day. We have no mechanism or programs in place or services to collect waste. And this is a neighborhood group that now has an annual collection of leaves every fall to get those composted instead of put into landfills. This started as 2 residents wanting to address this issue. In year 1, I think they had around 20 participants. They were able to get some money from their voluntary HOA group to fund collection from a local hauler that does composting. As of year 4, they now have hundreds of participants, including an army of volunteers that rake community yards for seniors and those that need help. And actually, for the first time this year, instead of it going into dumpsters, there's a local farm just actually right on the edge of the neighborhood, and all the leaves went there to this organic CSA model that's right in the neighborhood. So 2 people's idea addressing an issue, making a huge difference. In our Morse Park neighborhood, a couple of residents were really concerned. This is an older, more mature part of the city, but a lot of the trees are starting to die off, and they wanted to start getting trees planted. And they started with this goal of 200 trees, and actually they had so many planted they've now updated this. And the way they got this done was really working with local businesses to get discounts on at local nurseries on trees, picking out the right species that would be drought resistant and pest resistant in our climate, and then negotiating discounts, and then just getting the word out with a little bit of help from staff in the neighborhood. But this is all led and purchased and planted by residents. Another similar story, this is paint recycling. This started 3 years ago. They've now done 3 seasons, and now multiple neighborhoods all work together to do this big paint recycling event. There's also a fundraiser for a local high school band that plays music while cars line up to bring their paint cans in that community event. We've had hundreds and hundreds of neighborhood workshops, backyard, lessons on how to keep chickens or compost. It's really the heart and soul kind of foundation of this program, is residents sharing their skills with one another. And then sometimes we're seeing really amazing infrastructure improvements. This, in the Iber neighborhood, a group of residents took this plot of land outside the elementary school and turned it into this community garden through our program in a partnership with the students and with the neighborhood. We're also seeing a lot of wellness and community building efforts. This is just one of the many clubs. This is a biking club in one of our neighborhoods. In the 8 years of this program, this is all voluntary. This is all resident initiated and driven. We've had more than 14,000 participants and 600 projects, events, and workshops organized by the community. And the way that this really happens is that neighborhoods host workshops, create resources, complete their projects. They earn credits in a very simple credit system, and if they achieve enough of these credits in a year, they receive recognition and certification from the city as a sustainable neighborhood. We organize this very loosely in some broad goal areas that reflect a lot of the topics in the plan, but kind of in a way that's really easy to digest, and this really just helps guide neighborhood selection and helps us rein in appropriate projects. And they can earn credits through a whole variety of different types of projects and types of projects, and I don't want to get into the weeds too much here, but one of the big roles that the city plays here is really helping with their communication infrastructure within the neighborhood and helping them get organized. And so they earn a chunk of credits for an annual outreach plan where they identify all their communication channels, which ones they want help building out, and identify leads within the neighborhood to use those channels, who's going to be the point of contact for the newsletter that we'll print and mail a couple times a year, who's posting on Facebook, who's keeping the email list, et cetera. They earn credits for workshops, for special events. They can earn credits through their different clubs that they form, and of course, big chunks of credits when they set up big implementation projects and goals. And we've got 2 certification levels. Really, they need to earn at least 60 each year to maintain their status in the program, just so that we know that the time we're spending to work with them is worthwhile. And if they want to get the full recognition, they need to earn 100 in a year. And we recognize them with custom street signage and a variety of other pats on the back and recognition in front of our city council and from mayor and positive press. The way this really gets done is that residents have an amazing amount of creativity and passion and skills, and they come to us and they say, hey, here's what we want to be working on, and we, with one employee, and when we started this with a half-time FTE, we provide continuity, help thinking through their ideas, connections to resources already in the city or partners, and really just provide a safe operating space where they can feel comfortable communicating with their neighbors, and some support to help kind of take an idea and help it be formulated and have a pathway. And then the neighborhoods just organically, as these things start to take shape, start to build partnerships, and those seem to just continue to grow and strengthen within these neighborhoods until there's so many ideas and so many potential projects that it's hard to keep up with. I mentioned that we recognize them in the city. I wish I had a picture up here, but really nice signage in the neighborhoods, and we add the years of their certification around the outside of their sign, so there's a lot of pride there. And of course, there are tons of leadership opportunities. We actually have a current city council member who started by being active in this, in their community, and lots of board and commission members as well, who get involved right there doing some passion project in their neighborhood and start to get more interested in what's going on in the rest of the community. And the reason that we think this is really working and growing year after year, we've got more neighborhoods than we can accommodate applying to join this program when we open up the application process, is that it's their ideas and their neighborhood, and it's not the city telling them what to do, but them bringing their ideas. And the beauty is that almost all of those then support the goals in the plan, and we provide suggestions and opportunities for projects that advance our community plans and our goals, but none of that is forced. It's really all coming from the community, and we're here to help them brainstorm and connect them with resources. You might be wondering what kind of program infrastructure is there, and I'm going to wrap up in the next minute or two to make sure I don't take too much time, but I do want to just spend a moment to talk about what it takes from our organization to make this happen. We do have dedicated staff. At this point, it's not even one full-time employee, Alyssa, who was going to be here to present, is a 0.7. But we also have a intern, which is basically a position we carved out to provide input from leaders in the neighborhood. So the person that fills that position is a neighborhood resident and one of the leaders, and they provide us with a lot of important perspective of what we can do to keep making the program stronger and provide better resources through the lens of our neighbors. You need organizational support. One of the reasons that this is successful is that the city organization really values this, and what at first maybe seemed like we were making special requests from other departments to provide resources and expertise, they now realize is a really good opportunity to help solve some of their challenges and to have strong relationships with neighborhoods. And that's where that adaptive, innovative operating space that I mentioned in those first three questions, how do you create space for the unproven? This program is filling that. When it comes to things like how do we manage pesticide issues and chemicals on landscapes, our neighborhoods have come up with so many great ideas voluntarily working in the community that helped us then start pilot programs in our own parks. And instead of it being a combative topic, the neighborhood residents that are passionate about this, the nurseries and the sources of plants and expertise that's out there to how to really maintain landscapes in a healthy way without using those chemicals, and our Parks Department now are all working together. So that's just one of maybe 15 or 20 amazing examples where the innovation of these residential projects have then given us an opportunity to scale those ideas and implement those at the city level. And there's and the last bullet on here is really the website. We built a ton of supporting infrastructure to make it easier on staff. So the program website, basically every neighborhood has a landing page, it tracks their credits, and they have an opportunity to submit requests for the projects they want to do. It lets us know what's happening, and we can track every project that they've taken on, and other neighborhoods can go on and check it out as well. So as I mentioned, we have a half-time FTE. We provide that support, the consistency of that person and the relationships we find is really important. I mentioned the buy-in from the organization, the recognition and the ability to leverage our city resources. And we spend about $10,000 to $20,000 above the staffing cost to fund this every year, and that really goes to basic supplies, mailings, food, signs, those types of things. And when it comes to the big ticket items, like the big infrastructure projects like a community garden, we're just helping them with grant applications through the existing staff we have that are good at writing grants and things. We're not bringing a bunch of capital improvement dollars to this. We're just bringing expertise and some really basic support. You can go to the Sustainable Neighborhood Network website, www.sustainableneighborhoodnetwork.org. We built that out because our program has received a lot of recognition and awards, and we've now helped the city and county of Denver launch this program, the city of Fort Collins, Colorado launch this program, and the next month or so we're helping the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado launch this. And we all are now sharing this online web infrastructure that we built, which really helps track all of the projects and build community, which has been another amazing outcome of this project. So there you can see the system. We have a logo and a brand, and the network now, as we add all these other cities, is really growing strong, and the neighbors are sharing ideas with one another. And we've actually now done 2 years of leadership development with a retreat where we bring resident leaders from all the different neighborhoods together and do special trainings. So we're excited about the impact this is having right here for us, about the excitement to share it out with other communities, and we are in the process of creating a 501c3 to really host the network and help other communities adopt this model. So if you're interested, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to share information in more detail. And there's our contact information. And hopefully I didn't take too much extra time, and I can pass it on over so we can all learn from the folks in Chula Vista. Thank you so much.
Great, Jonathan. Thank you so much for that presentation. We did have a couple of questions that popped up. And again, we will have the presenters reply to the questions as a whole at the very end. A couple of housekeeping things. I will be sending out a recording of this webinar as well as a copy of the slides to whatever email address you registered under. So you should be getting that either today or early tomorrow. And now I'm excited to hand it over to Colleen and Corey with the City of Chula Vista.
Hi there, good afternoon. So great to hear about what Lakewood's doing and the excitement there, and I think some of this will tie in really nicely to the work they're doing in that region. So we're here from the City of Chula Vista. I'm not sure how familiar folks on the call are with the City of Chula Vista, but we are the second largest city in San Diego County, behind the City of San Diego. We're about 7 miles south of downtown San Diego and about 7 miles north of the world's busiest land border crossing. In 2013, we're listed as one of the second fastest growing population in the U.S. One of the interesting things about us is that we're actually growing quite a bit, especially to the east by the Otay Lakes area and the mountain area. We're expanding with millions of square feet of office space and high density communities, as well as some commercial areas out there. In addition, the bayfront there on San Diego Bay is being developed as well. It's been an ongoing process over many, many years, and they finally broke ground on the first development, I believe, last year, and that will again be high density housing, hotels, retail, and a convention center. So we're growing quite rapidly. But we also have sustainability in mind and have for quite a long time. We had the first climate action plan in the area in 2000, and actually probably beyond the area. Originally was called a CO2 reduction plan. Since then, we've created an adaptation plan, mitigation plan, and then in 2017, our most recent climate action plan was voted on by City Council. So we're busy right now implementing that. We're also looking ahead to do a climate action plan update in the next year or so. Just in the last year, we wrapped up phase 1 of an LED lighting retrofit for our roughly 40 city facility buildings, anything from libraries to police department, recreation center, our offices, and all those. Phase 2 will be coming probably in a year or so, which kind of tackles some of the more challenging lighting projects that we have. We're also in the process of wrapping up, I think it's our third or fourth phase of solar on our city facilities. We're adding around 2 megawatts of solar. That also includes 3 sites that will have battery storage once everything's turned on and ready to go, for a total of over 4 megawatts on city facilities. We just wrapped up in the last few months a pathway to zero net energy, again, for our city facilities, looking, big and small ways that we can be more efficient, whether it's from installing more efficient HVAC, continuing our lighting projects, looking at building controls, electrification of various systems, and then finding the gap of what we might need to add more renewables. As part of our climate action plan, we have a zero waste plan that is looking at 6 different kind of key areas. It's in draft form now. It will be voted on by City Council later this year. So staff is busy working out how to implement all of those fun things. And then another really exciting thing we've been working on the last couple of years is electrification of the city fleet. We shifted out a little over 40 vehicles from kind of old aging sedans to mostly plug-in electric vehicles, a couple plug-in hybrids. And then as well, we work with our local utility in a pilot program to expand the electric vehicle charging network in the city. So through that program called Power Your Drive, we were able to add 123 charging ports for city fleet as well as employees commuting to and from work here at the city. And this is all great. We've been working, in the city. We've been working, I forgot to mention, during the development of our adaptation plan, mitigation plan, and our most recent climate action plan. Like Lakewood, we reached out and worked with a variety of stakeholders from the community to help guide that process. So that's been some community involvement, but how do you bring this climate action planning effort to the community? How can they be involved? And what's in it for them? How do they get engaged in that? And that's where my colleague Corey is going to take it over from here.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, and it was really great to see the work that Lakewood's doing, and I think there's a lot of parallels that you'll see. So, I'll start by saying, like a lot of jurisdictions, we have a lot of goals. We have greenhouse gas reduction goals that are in our climate action plan. We want to go to 100% renewable energy. We want to be a bicycle-friendly community. So, there's no shortage of goals to strive for. And we also have a lot of information. Since we do deal with so many topics under sustainability, we could be providing information about composting, biking, energy efficiency, renewable energy, electric vehicles. It goes down the list, and there's a lot of information to provide, and we want to provide the best and most actionable information. How we do that? We're trying to change a little bit. One of the elements that we want to incorporate more of is what's called community-based social marketing. It has nothing to do with Facebook or Instagram, and everything to do with human psychology and how we work with large groups. And basically, what a lot of it comes down to is people aren't always completely rational, information-based people all of the time. A lot of times, what motivates individuals to make change is not necessarily, seeing information on a flyer, but hearing about it or seeing a trusted friend, family, or neighbor that's also taking that action, and that internal realization of, oh, that's my friend, they're similar to how I am, I can do that action as well. If it benefits them, it might also benefit me. So there's a lot of kind of shifting in how we're looking at reaching out to our community members. And one of the new methods that we're trying out right now is the Chula Vista Climate Action Challenge. So what this is it's a website platform that we work with a consultant to put in place. It's called, the consultant is Climate Community Solutions. And they've provided this service to a number of jurisdictions in California, around the state. This is kind of our logo and our version of it. But the main components of it are, it allows residents to log on to the website and create an account, answer a few questions about how they use energy and activities in their house, and then it provides them a carbon baseline, which is really good to kind of just put a sense of around how much reductions are we talking about at a household level. It also compares it to international carbon averages as well as national. So you get a chance to see where do we line up just on our everyday regular behavior that we're taking right now. And importantly, it allows them to learn about more than 100 sustainable actions that they can take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They can join community groups or teams, and this is where the community feature comes into this tool. There's lots of engagement between users, and it's really designed to be a tool that supports community groups out in the field, not a standalone online tool. So, and also mentioned there's the engagement with community through leaderboards. If you do actions, you get some points. Community groups have point totals and different, there can be different leaders at different times. And there's also messaging features. So if you like an action, you can either post to your community group and say, I had a great deal down the street on this device that helped me save some energy, or you can post to everyone else who's interested in learning about that and say, I had a great experience with this. Here's some tips, or here's how I learned about it. So here's I'll go through a few just shots of the climate website. And I didn't put a link in here. I realized I took out the link, but you can just find it at our chulavistaca.gov/clean. There's a link to it there, or search Chula Vista Climate Action Challenge. So it has, really user-friendly page with some dials that are right up there to show, how many people are participating, what type of progress we've seen so far, as well as highlighting the community groups. It's really easy to join, and like I said, they'll answer a few questions and create their account, and then they can activate their action plan. And they can look over 100 different actions, ranging from simple actions like adjusting the thermostat there, to larger actions like installing a heat pump water heater or solar panels or electric vehicles. There's actions that are more focused on community engagement, education. So it really does, has a wide variety of actions that they can do. And if they're interested, they can simply go to click on one of the actions. It will tell them up front here how much it might impact them, whether they'll see energy savings, what the upfront cost might be, how much energy they'll save. And these are all custom created for their household based on the information that they provide when they sign up. So it'll kind of give a range. If they have a really big energy bill, they might save a little bit more. And so that can be helpful and just have that be more personal information. And then they'll, as they scroll down on the same page, there'll be some information about the action. So there's 1 and 2. It breaks it down into steps that they can take, and there's even smaller steps within each of those. So it really breaks it down and walks them through all the information that they'll need. And then there's also local resources. One of the advantages of this tool is it allows the city staff to, or the contractor does all the updating of the website and provides the generic information, and then we just provide the local resources if there's local assistance programs, rebate incentives, guides, anything like that that we want them to know about for each action, we can put it in there. But city staff doesn't have to create the basic information, which is really helpful and keeping staff, spreading staff around. So this is what the kind of some of the engagement looks like. We have a community leaderboard, a team leaderboard, as well as neighborhood leaderboard. So you get to see kind of as groups who's taking more action. Each of the points over there on the right relates to actions that they've completed. So the more actions they complete, the more points they get, and they'll get to go up in the community leaderboards as well as the other leaderboards. As I mentioned, there's messaging features. So if anyone's interested in providing feedback, again, just sharing your experience with other community members, that opportunity is built in. And then again, it's just kind of, you can either go to different, you can message based on actions or community, or just message everybody. So like I said, there's lots of that engagement to help residents feel more confident and just engage with each other more. We've launched this effort last April, so we've had it for about a year. There has been a lot of, or it does take a lot of support to engage residents and have them sign up for the challenge. It's not something that we can just email out there and get lots of people engaging with it. It really does take a conversation. People have very busy schedules, and so just kind of connecting the work that they're already doing with the community group on climate to this tool and providing it as for them. We've hosted a movie kind of meetup to bring people together, get them talking about actions. We watched a movie about climate change impacts. Provided some food and information, and it was really helpful to get more people engaged and show possibilities of what they can do themselves. And now we're also working with a community group to host a similar event for their members to educate them and bring in more members as well. So finally, some of the results that we've seen so far. Like I said, we've been operating this for about a year, so it's still new for us, but we want to keep promoting it. And again, kind of building on that success, or letting the community members really take and lead this as their own, and we're supporting them, which can be a little bit different role for city staff who always want to be in charge and meet deadlines and do everything on our schedule. But I think in the long term that having the community empowered will help make it much more strong and ongoing support for our community. So as I mentioned, we've had about more than 120 homes signed up. We've had over 129 actions completed, 7 community groups formed, 250 tons of carbon reduced. And the top 5 actions are pretty straightforward. Typically the easier, cheaper actions to complete. But that's, I think, it's also helpful to show that it doesn't have to be intimidating. There's information and opportunities for everybody to participate and create a cleaner community. So with that, I'll leave my contact information on the screen there, and if there's any questions, we'd be happy to talk about any other aspects.
Great, Corey. Thank you so much for that. We do have plenty of time for questions here. So as I mentioned, you guys can feel free to enter questions in the chat box here. I'll start with a couple that have already popped up. So the first one, and I believe this is for Jonathan from Lakewood, is how do you manage expectations from community members who are really wanting to take this further and who might be slightly frustrated by what is seen as like an incremental approach?
That's a great question. I think if I understand it, what happens when, they run into a barrier to what they're trying to get done that might be political or policy in nature, and then it kind of runs up into can it be under a city umbrella that there's some kind of activism taking place? If that's a question, that's something that we've wrestled with, but what's actually happened has been, I wish I could have say that it was part of the plan, but it's just kind of organically happened, and that is that we've established pretty clear policies that under the umbrella of the Sustainable Neighborhoods program, it's about working collaboratively and getting projects done and not about political action. So there's been, I can think of at least 3 right off the top of my head examples where initiatives or projects that started in neighborhoods kind of got to a line that became uncomfortable. So one was in the energy space where we had a group of residents really wanting to push us towards 100% renewable and wanting to come in front of our city council and, demand that they put more resources to this as a city, hire more staff to directly work on energy issues. We asked that group that they not use the Sustainable Neighborhoods umbrella, that we couldn't use city resources directly to support that. And to meet offline. And so that group, though, came together through working on some initial projects to really set some goals at a neighborhood level for energy reduction and host some workshops. And then they formed a separate group without us involved at all, and it became Clean Energy Lakewood and was one of our first and only real energy focused specific in Lakewood groups. And so they're alive and well, making a lot of impact, but not under our umbrella. We had a very similar story with multimodal transportation, and so the offshoot of that came out of this is a Lakewood Bicycle Advisory Team, which is a group that now works with our transportation department, and our transportation engineers helped update the city's bike plan and have done a bunch of work in that space. Not quite as political, just very focused and wanting to get into more of the policy that was being driven by a different department, and so they formed kind of a separate group. And similarly, was the third one I was thinking about. Now I'm dropping, but we've had very similar things with waste and with some of the issues around chemical use on landscapes that I've talked about. So really what we've encouraged them to do is kind of form separate entities or work offline separate from the Sustainable Neighborhoods. And really, if anything, it's just catalyzed leadership. It hasn't really been a barrier or frustration. Hope that answers the question.
Great, thanks. Yes, I think so. Thanks for the information. And Corey, this question is for you, and it was in regards to the statistic you shared about 250 tons of CO2 being reduced. Can you clarify, is that an estimate based on the effects or the actions that were taken by either those community groups or individuals, or was this done as a measurement?
No, so there's no, it's all estimates based on actions that the residents are saying that they've completed. That being said, they do use their own energy information and energy usage history to educate the calculator that calculates the emission reductions. So, it is an estimate that's, at least for the energy side, based on their actual energy usage, and so it should be pretty accurate. I guess in that sense, it could be, considered a measurement. But other than that, no, we wanted to make sure that that there was really easy to for anybody to be able to participate, and that they wouldn't need to get anything, any special equipment or do any type of like monitoring necessarily. Our goal is to really encourage that the action, the conservation. We try to provide really good estimates of what type of emission reductions they can see. But this is also it's a voluntary program. We're not using this for any regulatory obligation or anything like that. So, it's really more about the actions than the specific measurements.
Great, thanks for that. And a follow-up question, somewhat related. What's the difference between an individual participating in this program and taking the actions, and then where do the community groups come into play?
So an individual, so there's kind of three levels that users can engage with the tool at. There's the individual household level. Everything is based around the house. So it does ask about like other people that live in the home, what type of, if other people drive to commute to work or whatnot. That's kind of the smallest, most detailed level is that household level. Then there is a team level, which is can be a group of up to 10 households. So it's kind of designed to be like your neighborhood block or maybe a close group of family or a close group of friends, but a smaller group that engage with each other. And then community groups are the largest association, and they're not capped, so they could be as many households in each community group as would like to join. And it's really designed around community groups who are already meeting regularly in your community. So one of ours, there's a 350 group here that meets every month to talk about climate, and they've been a really active participant. They have their own community group, and they're kind of use it as a kind of a little bit of a member benefit and just information to engage with their members and keep track and promote workshops or information with their members. But they can be as large as they would like to be, and like I said, it's really designed for groups that are already meeting in the community.
Great, thanks for that clarification. This next question looks like it is for both Lakewood and Chula Vista. We'll start with Lakewood. And the question is, due to the widely white nature of the environmental movement, how do you bring diversity and equity into your plans themselves?
Oh, such a good question, and I wish I had an easy answer. I think it's an area that we have not excelled in. I'll just be upfront, especially when it comes to the Sustainable Neighborhoods Program. I think there's a lot of the projects and the efforts that the residents have identified to work on are about addressing issues that relate to income inequality or lack of equitable access to resources. We've got residents in neighborhoods that have trained to become literacy tutors at the local elementary schools. A ton of the local food projects are about getting food from people's yards into food pantries for fresh food access. Coat drives, all kinds of service-related efforts to try to build and help the community. The unfortunate shortcoming, though, is that most of the people organizing and doing that work fall into a very kind of typical environmentalist, if you might call it that, demographic. And because this is a lot of volunteer time, we see a lot of the participation is middle-aged to older, white, and heavily female in terms of who's getting a lot of this work done and leading these efforts, and a lot of kind of early retirees. So I think it's a shortcoming. I wish we actually have done some research and some workshops. Alyssa, who's unfortunately not on the call, but has made this a priority, and so actually it's an area that we are actively working on addressing, and we've integrated requirements and scoring points into the application process. So as we get new neighborhoods coming on board, that's part of the decision factor. I think now that we've had success and this is all voluntary and we've really tried to be hands-off as far as who and how, the participation takes place. Now that we've had success and there is so much demand, we have a little more leeway to really kind of create some more requirements and get a little more involved, and we're going to use that primarily to focus on trying to be better on this topic. So.
Great. Yeah, I think this is a great question because I think that's, something that this field in general struggles with and needs to keep a pulse on. So great to hear that you're thinking about it. Chula Vista, did you have a response to that question as well?
Yeah, I was going to say, again, it's a really good question, and similar to Lakewood, it's something we're working on and trying to incorporate more of. One thing I will say is that because, as I mentioned, the goal around the climate challenge is really to give a tool to our community members. Because we do have a relatively diverse community, we have seen some diversity in our community groups just because those are the community members that are engaging in our platform. We would definitely like it to be more diverse, and we're working on ways to support that and incorporate that in our planning efforts. One thing I will mention is the city of San Diego to the north of us recently released I believe they called it a climate equity index report, and that was really, that's something that we're looking to incorporate some of our own efforts for, and just looking at metrics to track and ways to engage, and to kind of use that as a tool for future city planning efforts. So that's something that we're currently looking at right now.
Great. And then just a quick question for both of you. There's some interest in, if they're available, sharing your various climate action plans. Is that something that you would be able to share with me, and then I can email out to registrants?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, of course. And you can find ours online at lakewood.org/sustainability plan. And I would also point everybody to our annual report. So because we've got 30-some plus measurable targets, and I think around 90 different indicators that we're tracking, we put out an annual report every year to be transparent and accountable, particularly of the things we're not getting done, to make sure we don't pat ourselves on the back too much. So there's an annual report that is maybe an easier, quicker read to digest kind of what is in the plan and how we're doing.
Great, thanks. And it looks like I just skipped over a question. Should be a quick one here for you, Jonathan. How large is the average neighborhood in your program that is participating?
There is no kind of average size. I think what has been great about this program is that it's very scalable. So our largest neighborhood has, I want to say, 6,000 or 7,000 households. The neighborhoods define their own geographies based on, kind of typical neighborhoods as people identify with them, or census tracts, and geographic areas, and we work with them to try to help them make sense. So sometimes we end up with really large areas. The smallest is one townhome HOA of 75 townhomes. And I think what's really cool is that the program is very scalable. So the opportunities that exist in the Green Mountain neighborhood, they've gotten a ton done and a lot in their schools and at their parks and community gardens and a lot of different workshops, but the direct impacts for households has to be very voluntary. At the HOA level, like the Lake Lockwood Village townhomes, they can come together as an HOA through this program and target their water use in their shared landscapes and decide that's a priority and really vote to take that all on at once. Or they've done energy audits. They all have the same buildings. There are these fourplexes scattered around the property. So they were able to get a handful of energy audits done, and once they saw the common themes, apply that to all of their buildings and then bring that up as, helping them prioritize improvements through their HOA. So it's really cool that it's scalable and that there's just a variety of opportunities depending on the type of neighborhood, whether it's, a loose neighborhood organization type of place, a formal HOA, or something even bigger or different.
Great. Yeah, that's wonderful that there aren't really any size barriers to participation. And I am going to try to sneak in one final question here. We're getting close to the end of our time. But I think this is an interesting sort of larger question to end on here. With your programs and your climate efforts, have you found that sort of the global climate effort, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, is that what's really resonating with your communities, or are you finding that this local collection, this local activity is a little bit more meaningful to folks and a little bit more digestible here on the local level?
I can take a shot. This is Corey from Chula Vista. I can take a shot at that. I would say at some level they have a lot of our like sustainability commissioner volunteers are kind of plugged into the USDN goals, but that's not something that we necessarily hear about more out in the field for more lay residents and businesses in our community. In that sense, I think the local impacts are really important. But that being said, I will say that we've seen a lot of effort around youth action, and a lot of the youth action is really looking at global initiatives, really large policy proposals. And so in that sense, we've definitely seen that be really resonant here in our community, but not as much the USDN goals.
I would say that those big picture things, there's obviously, some of the really passionate folks are dialed in. And I think the big global issues as a whole are relevant to folks, but really the success here is that they feel like they're making an impact locally, and there's somewhere to channel their desire to share their skills and passions with one another. And I think whether it's we have a whole bunch of residents that just do one thing every year, right? Like there's someone passionate about cycling and they host a bike to work station in their neighborhood every year, to the folks that are involved with anything and everything that comes up in their neighborhood. And it's just about feeling like they're sharing, building community, and making a difference locally. It's definitely much more about the local impact and connection.
Great. Wonderful. That does end our time for today. I really want to thank Jonathan, Colleen, and Corey. I know that you guys are very busy doing all of this work, so thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us here today and to share some of the great work that's going on in both Lakewood and Chula Vista. As I mentioned, I'm going to be gathering a couple of extra resources from our presenters, and then I will send out a follow-up email likely tomorrow that'll include slides, the recording, and any of the requested resources that we talked to. We do host a webinar series every month, so please stay tuned. Next month, we're going to be focusing on aging in place cities and some of the efforts that communities are doing to make their communities age friendly. So stay in tune about a possible registration link when that is available. And again, thank you all so much, and feel free to email me with any additional questions.
Thank you.